My father sat across the dinner table, cutting his steak the way he always did, slow, deliberate, like a man who had all the time in the world. I was 22. My acceptance letter to nursing school was sitting beside my plate, and I had spent 3 days rehearsing what I was going to say. I got in, I told him. But the program's expensive. $54,000 for 2 years. I was hoping. He set his knife down. Just for a second. Then he picked it back up. You're a smart girl, Mara, he said. Smart enough to figure it out. That was it. That was the whole conversation. My mother looked at her plate. My younger brother, Derek, who was 17 and hadn't been asked to figure out anything yet, asked if there was more gravy. I stared at my acceptance letter for a long time that night. Then I folded it, put it in my drawer, and started looking up student loan applications. I want you to understand something before I go any further. My father was not a poor man. He owned a commercial landscaping company that had been in our family for 23 years. He drove a black Ford F-250, new every 3 years. My mother wore a different coat to church almost every Sunday from October through March. We were not struggling. We had never struggled. My grandmother had left him a piece of land in Virginia that he sold in 2009 for just under $400,000. I knew all of this. I did the math the way you do when you're young and you think facts will matter. They didn't. I took out loans. I worked nights at a diner on Route 9 where the booths smelled like cigarettes and the manager paid me in cash when the register was short. I took double shifts on weekends. I studied in the break room between tables, my textbook propped against a ketchup bottle, memorizing medication dosages under fluorescent lights, while the cook yelled at the dishwasher about something that never changed. My first year of nursing school, I didn't go home for Thanksgiving. I told my mother I had a shift. I did have a shift, but I also couldn't afford the bus ticket, and I wasn't going to tell her that. I called home on Christmas morning instead. My father answered, said Merry Christmas, handed the phone to my mother, and I could hear Derek in the background complaining that his new laptop was taking too long to set up. I graduated 2.5 years later, top of my program. I stood in that gym in my white uniform with $4,000 left on my loans, and no one in the audience who shared my last name. My clinical supervisor, a woman named Patricia, who had been an ER nurse for 19 years and had the kind of calm that only comes from having seen everything, told me afterward that I had the best assessment instincts of any student she'd supervised in a decade. She wrote me a recommendation that I still have, folded in a manila envelope in the second drawer of my desk. I got hired at a hospital in Charlotte. Then I went back to school at night for my nurse practitioner certification. Then I moved to a private cardiology practice that was growing fast and needed people who could manage patient panels and weren't afraid of the administrative side. I turned out to be very good at the administrative side. By the time I was 29, I was the clinical operations director for a group of 4 cardiology practices across the Carolinas. By 31, I was a partner. I paid off my loans on a Tuesday in November. I remember because it was raining and I sat in my car in the parking garage of my office building for 10 minutes, just looking at the confirmation number on my phone. I didn't call anyone. There was no one obvious to call. My mother and I talked every few weeks. She asked about the weather and my apartment and whether I was eating enough. She never asked about work, because I think she didn't entirely understand what I did, and I didn't push. My father and I spoke on birthdays, briefly, and at Christmas, briefly. And that was enough for both of us. Derek was a different story. A year after I left for nursing school, my father sat Derek down. I heard about this from my mother, slowly, in pieces, over years, and told him he had real potential, that he had an eye for business, that the family company needed fresh thinking. Derek was 18. He had just barely graduated high school, and his primary skill at that point was knowing every statistic about every NFL quarterback for the past 15 years, which is not nothing, but is also not exactly an MBA. My father paid for Derek's business degree at a private university in Richmond, $48,000 a year. Then, he paid for a 1-bedroom apartment near campus because the dorms weren't right for him. Then, when Derek graduated and had an idea for a landscaping equipment distribution company, an offshoot of my father's existing business, essentially, my father gave him the startup capital $220,000. I know that number because my mother told me, her voice careful and even, 3 years after it happened, on a Wednesday afternoon when she called me for no reason, and then spent 40 minutes getting to the point. Your father believes in Derek, she said. He always has. I didn't say anything for a moment. I know, I said finally. He believes in you too, Mara. Okay, I said. She didn't say anything else about it, neither did I. We talked about my apartment for a while and then she said she had to start dinner. I hung up and sat with it for a long time. Not the anger I was used to the anger. I had made a kind of peace with it the way you make peace with a scar that doesn't hurt anymore but is still there every time you look down. What I sat with was something quieter and harder to name. It was the picture of my father sitting Derek down, telling him he had potential, telling him the family needed him, choosing, not by accident, not because he didn't know I existed, but choosing, clearly and completely, on purpose. That was the thing I kept coming back to. I threw myself into work. Not as a coping mechanism, I want to be clear about that, because I've heard the story told that way and it's not right. I threw myself into work because I loved it. I loved the complexity of managing patient outcomes at scale. I loved the problem of how to make 4 different practices feel like one coordinated system. I loved sitting across from a cardiologist who had trained for 12 years and being the person in the room who understood the operational piece well enough to tell them what was actually slowing their patients down. I was good at it. And being good at something, really good, after being told to figure it out on your own, there's a particular satisfaction in that. Clean and uncomplicated and yours. Our group was acquired by a regional health network in the spring of my 32nd year. The deal closed on a Friday. My share of the partnership buyout was enough that I sat in my car again afterward, in a different parking garage, looking at a different number on a different phone screen. It was a very large number. I treated myself to dinner at a restaurant where you needed a reservation 3 weeks out and the pasta was made fresh every morning. I sat alone at a table by the window and ordered the tasting menu and a glass of wine that cost more than my diner shifts used to pay in a full night. And I watched people on the sidewalk below moving through their lives, and I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Not triumphant. Just settled. Like I had finally arrived somewhere I had been trying to get to for a long time, and now that I was there, the getting there was the thing I'd needed all along. I want to be honest about what happened next, because I've told this story a few times now and I've been tempted to make myself sound more prepared than I was. I wasn't prepared. I didn't have a plan. I was just living my life. It was my mother who called, a Thursday morning in October, 8 days after the acquisition closed. Your father had a heart attack, she said. He's stable. He's at Street Augustine's. I was at my desk when she called. I had a meeting in 20 minutes. I stood up and walked to the window and looked at the street. How bad? I asked. The doctor said it was a significant event. He's going to need surgery. He's Mara. He's asking for you. I didn't say anything. He's asking for you, she said again, and her voice was smaller this time, like she was apologizing for something. I flew home the next morning. Street Augustine's was 40 minutes from the house I grew up in. I knew the hospital. I had done a clinical rotation there 12 years earlier. The cardiac unit was on the 3rd floor, East Wing. I walked through the main entrance, and the smell of the place hit me the way hospitals always do. Antiseptic and warm, and something underneath that you never quite identify. My mother was in the hallway when I came off the elevator. She was wearing her good coat, the dark green one, which struck me as strange and also completely characteristic of her. She held onto my arm for a moment. He looks worse than he is, she said. Who's his cardiologist? She told me. I knew the name, respected, well-trained, not the flashiest, but thorough and conservative in a way that's actually what you want for a patient my father's age. He's good, I said. Your father is in good hands. She looked at me with something complicated in her eyes. Your hands would be better. I didn't know what to say to that. I squeezed her arm and walked down the hall. My father looked small in the hospital bed. He had always been a large man, wide shoulders, thick hands, a kind of physical confidence that filled a room, and the gown and the monitors and the pallor had reduced him in a way I wasn't ready for. He looked up when I came in. For a moment, neither of us said anything. You came, he said. I came, I said. I sat down in the chair beside the bed. I looked at his chart. He didn't ask me to, but he didn't tell me to stop. His ejection fraction was low. The blockage was significant. The surgery was scheduled for Monday. You should be okay, I said. The plan looks right. Are you in pain? Discomfort, he said. Not pain. That was such a him thing to say that I almost smiled. We sat quietly for a while. The monitor beeped. Down the hall, someone's family was having a loud conversation about parking. Derek's coming Saturday, he said. Okay. My father stopped. He looked at the window. The business isn't doing well. I waited. He came to me 3 months ago, my father said. Needed capital to keep it running. I gave him what I had liquid. It wasn't enough. A long pause. He's going to lose it, the whole thing. I looked at my hands. I'm sorry, I said. And I meant it, because whatever I felt about the choices my father had made, watching something you'd built fall apart is its own grief. And I understood that. I made mistakes, my father said. He said it quietly, like he wasn't sure the words were going to come all the way out. I looked at him. I know you worked, he said. I know what it cost you. I told myself it was. I told myself you were strong, that you didn't need what Derek needed. He stopped. That was a story I told myself. I know that. The monitor beeped 3 times. A nurse passed in the hallway. I don't need an apology right now, I said. You need to rest, and you need to get through Monday, and you need to do your cardiac rehab properly after, which I know you're going to fight, because you've never liked being told what to do, but you're going to do it anyway, because I'm going to be extremely annoying about it, okay? He looked at me for a long moment. Okay, he said. Good. I stayed for 4 days. I talked to his surgical team. I sat with my mother in the waiting room during the procedure, and we drank terrible coffee, and she told me stories about when I was very small that I had never heard before. I had apparently once tried to reorganize all the spice jars in the kitchen by color at age 3, and had been furious when my mother put them back alphabetically. We laughed about that, quietly, in the waiting room. The surgery went well. Derek arrived Saturday morning. We hadn't spoken in almost 2 years, a slow drift more than any single rupture. He looked tired. He looked like someone who had been carrying something heavy for longer than he'd expected to and was starting to realize it wasn't going to put itself down. He saw me in the hallway and stopped. Mara, he said. Derek, I said. We stood there for a moment in the particular awkwardness of family. I heard about the acquisition, he said. Yeah. He looked at his shoes. You did well. I worked hard, I said. Not unkindly, just accurately. Something moved across his face. He nodded once, slowly. I know you did. We went in to see our father together. The 3 of us sat in that room and talked about small things, the old truck my father was going to have to sell because he couldn't maintain the company the way he had been, a cousin's new baby, the weather coming in from the west. My father held my hand at one point and didn't say anything about it, and neither did I. Before I left on Tuesday morning, my mother walked me to my rental car. The sun was low and cold, and the leaves were mostly gone from the trees along the driveway. I didn't know how to fight him, she said. When you needed help and he said no. I want you to know I'm not. I'm not asking you to forgive that. I just want you to know I knew it was wrong. I looked at the bare trees. I know, Mom, I said. You turned out extraordinary, she said. You did that yourself. I turned and looked at her. She was standing with her hands folded in front of her, still in her good coat, still holding herself with that particular careful dignity she'd always had. Some of it was spite, I told her. And she laughed a real laugh, surprised out of her, and I hugged her for a long moment in the cold driveway. I flew back to Charlotte that afternoon. 3 weeks later, Derek called me. It took him a while to get to the point, which is Derek's way. He asked about Dad's recovery. He asked about Charlotte. He told me about a deal he'd been trying to close that had fallen through. And then, carefully, like a man navigating ice, he asked if I might be interested in talking to him about the business. He wasn't asking for anything specific, just wondering if we could talk. I sat with the phone and looked out my window at the city. Send me the financials, I said. I'll look at them. Mara, don't say thank you yet. I'm just looking. No promises. Right, he said. Okay. Yeah. The financials were a mess, not unfixable, but a mess. He had overextended on inventory. The margins on the distribution model were thinner than he'd projected, and he'd been paying himself a salary that didn't reflect the company's actual position. The bones were there, though. The market segment was real. The problem was operational, not fundamental. I called him back 10 days later. "I'm not going to give you money," I told him. A silence. "But I'll consult. 6 weeks. I'll come in on weekends, look at your operations, tell you what I think. If the recommendations are sound and you actually implement them, the business might be salvageable. If you don't, or if you can't, that's the answer. Either way, you'll know." Another silence, longer this time. "Why?" he said. It was a fair question. "Because he's going to recover," I said, "and when he does, he's going to want to know his son's okay. And because I grew up in the same house as you and that has to mean something, even if we did it differently." I paused. "And because I'm actually very good at this, and you need someone who's very good at this, and I'm not going to pretend I'm not good at it because of how things went." Derek was quiet for a long time. "I heard you say that to Dad once," he said. "When you were little, that you were good at things. He told you not to brag." I remembered that. I had been 9. I had won a science fair ribbon. "Yeah," I said. "I thought about that a lot," Derek said. "Later, when I got older." His voice was different now, lower. "I didn't understand what was happening to you. I was too young, and then I was too selfish, and then too much time had passed, and I didn't know how to say it. But I knew it wasn't right." I looked at the window. The city was doing what it always did, which was keep moving, indifferent, and bright. "Send me your operational calendar," I said. "I'll be there the second weekend of November. I want to tell you that the 6 weeks were easy, or that they were cleanly dramatic, or that there was some single moment where everything turned and the music swelled. That's not how it happened. It happened the way real things happen, gradually, and imperfectly, and with a lot of unglamorous spreadsheet work and difficult conversations and moments where I had to hold my tongue and moments where I didn't." Derek listened. That surprised me more than I expected it to. He pushed back. "He's stubborn. We both are. It runs in the family," but he listened. He made the changes. He let go of 2 inventory contracts that were bleeding him dry. He restructured his staffing model. He had a conversation with his 2 remaining clients that I helped him prepare for, and he was honest with them in a way that, I think, actually strengthened those relationships. My father came to the business once, on a Saturday in late November, still moving slowly from the surgery, a little thinner, wearing a jacket I didn't recognize. He stood in the warehouse and looked around for a long time without saying anything. Derek walked him through the new system. I stood to the side. At one point, my father looked over at me. I was looking at a logistics printout and pretending not to watch him. "Mara," he said. I looked up. "You built that whole hospital network," he said. "By yourself." "With a team?" I said. "I looked it up," he said. "After the acquisition. I read about it." He paused. "I didn't know. I mean, I knew you were doing well, but I didn't know." I held the printout. The warehouse was cold and smelled like machine oil, and the winter light came in flat through the high windows. "I needed you to know when it mattered," I said. "Not after." He nodded. He didn't argue with that. I think he knew better than to argue with it. "I'm sorry," he said. Just that. Not an explanation or a defense. Just the 2 words. Plain. I let them sit there for a moment. "Work on Derek's presentation for the March client review," I said. "He's going to need help with the delivery, and you've been doing this for 30 years. You know what these clients want to hear. That's actually useful right now." My father looked at me with something in his eyes that I didn't try to name. "I can do that," he said. "Good," I said, and went back to the printout. The business stabilized. It's not a spectacular success story. It's a small regional distribution company with solid margins and 3 good clients and room to grow slowly, which is actually what it should be. Derek knows that now. He calls me every few weeks to talk through decisions, and I give him my honest read. And he argues sometimes, and sometimes he just says, "Okay," and we hang up. My father is doing his cardiac rehab. He argues with his physical therapist, who is apparently not impressed by this. My mother told me that, and she was laughing when she did. I go home twice a year now, Christmas and once in the summer, usually for a long weekend. It's different. Not perfect, my father and I still talk around things sometimes, still navigate the shape of what was said and what wasn't. I don't think that fully disappears. I don't think I need it to. What I know is this. I sat in a diner on Route 9 at 22 years old, and I memorized medication dosages under bad lighting, because no one was going to do it for me. And it turned out that was the truest education I ever got. Not because difficulty is inherently good, not because I needed to suffer to earn anything, but because I learned, bone deep, that I was capable of more than anyone had measured me for. And that knowledge doesn't leave you. It becomes structural. It becomes the thing you stand on. My father told me to figure it out. I did. I just didn't figure out what he expected me to figure out. I figured out something larger, something that turned out to be mine in a way that nothing handed to me could have been. I think about that 9-year-old with the science fair ribbon sometimes, the one who said she was good at things and got told not to brag. She was right. She was always right. And she figured that out too, eventually, standing in a cold warehouse in November, holding a logistics printout, watching her father look at what she'd built. That was enough. That was exactly enough.